Janmadhyasya yatam vayaritartas chatir swavigyasvara Tenne brahma vruddhaya adhikavaye mujjantija suraya Tejo varimrida jata vinimayo jatra trisagurmisya
Damna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi.
Dhamna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes,
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all
And
manifestations.
he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
It is he only who first imparted Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is the only who first imparted Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahma,
the original living being.
the original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into
As one is
illusion.
bewildered by the illusory representations of the material
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations
of
the
water
material
seen on fire or land seen on water.
or water seen the fire of land seen the water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universe
temporarily manifested by the reaction of three modes of nature,
temporarily manifested by the reaction of three modes of
appear
nature,
factual although they're unreal.
appear factual, although they are
I therefore
real.
meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord
who
Shri
is
Krishna,
eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental
which is
abode,
forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representations of
I
the material world.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute
I
truth.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma pujita kaitravocha,
Dharma prujita kaitaputra,
paramo nirmatsaranam satam,
paramo nirmasaranam
vedyam
satam,
vastavam atra vastu,
vedyam vastavamastra vastu,
shivadam tapa trayanmulanam,
shivadam ta putrayamulanam,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni
Kim va
Krite,
parer ishvara,
Kim Vaparishvara,
Sadyo hridaya avarujyate tra,
Sadhyurudya Varijatitra,
Kriti bihi sususubhistakshanat,
Kritivhi Shushushuvistatkyanat,
completely rejecting all the religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are material
This
motivated.
Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully
The
pure in
highest
heart.
truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth is the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the gracious Vasudeva in its maturity
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
is sufficient itself for God
What is the
realization.
need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message from our
by this
Bhagavatam,
culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpatoror galitam phalam,
sukamukad amrita dravya samyatam,
Sukamukad amrita drava sangitam,
pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamarayam,
muhur ahor rasika bhuvibhavakaha.
Mura Hurasika
O
Bhuvivavaka.
expert and thoughtful men relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad
the
Bhagavatam,
mature fruit of the desired true Vedic literatures.
the mature fruit, the desired tree of Vedic
It
literatures.
emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami,
It emanated from the lips of Shishukadeva Goswami.
and therefore this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Shrimvatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravanam Kirtana,
Vidyantaksto hi Badrani,
Vidyantastohya Bhadrani,
Vidunoti Srihitsatam.
Vidunoti Surit Satam.
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the Vedic literature,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
If one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Shri Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart.
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart,
It purifies the devotee who can constantly engage in hearing of him.
purifies the devotee who is constantly engaged in hearing from him.
In this, Nasta Presu Bhadresu
Nasta presha bhadrishu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
nityang bhagavata seva
Bhagavati Uttamasloke
bhagavati uttama
Bhaktir
shloke
Bhavati Naistaki.
bhakti bhavati naistiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
In this way, devotee naturally develop his dormant transcendental
As he
knowledge.
hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the devotees,
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
kamalobhadayaschaye
chete tairanavidam
chaitairanabhidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
stitam sadve prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of ignorance,
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasanna manasu
bhagavat bhakti yogataha
bhagavad bhakti yogata
bhagavat tattva vijnanam
bhagavad tattva jnanam
mukta sangasya jayate.
mukta sangasa jayate.
When these purities are wiped away,
Where those impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
the candidate remains steady in his position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotion,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis
Vidyate hridaya granthis
chidyante sarva samsaya
chidyante sarva samshaya
siyante chasya karmani
chidyante sascha
drishta
karmani
evat manishvare.
drusta evadmanishwari.
Thus bhakti yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
Thus the Bhakti Yoga serves the heart of the material affection
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables us to come at once to the stage of Asamsha Samagrama,
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of Godhead.
understanding the supreme absolute true personality of Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna, from his devotees,
in Krishna consciousness,
in Krishna consciousness,
can one understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of Krishna.
Srimad Bhagvatam, Grantaraj Ki Jai. Canto 1, Chapter 18, verse number 8. Kim nu bale susurena
Kim nu balishu surena
kalina dira biruna
kalinadira biruna
apramata pramatesu
apramatta pramateshu
yovriko nishu vartate.
yovriko nrishu vartate.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Pariksit considered that less intelligent men might find the personality of Kali to be very powerful, but those who are self-controlled would have nothing to fear. The king was powerful like a tiger and took care of the foolish, careless persons. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Those who are not devotees to the Lord are careless and unintelligent. Unless one is thoroughly intelligent, one cannot be a devotee of the Lord. Those who are not devotees of the Lord fall prey to the actions of Kali. It will not be possible to bring about a saner condition in society unless we are prepared to accept the modes of action adopted by Maharaj Pariksit. That is, propagation of the devotional service of the Lord to the common man. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
So the characterization of foolish non-devotees of the Lord is that they're careless and unintelligent. And that's a fact. They engage in all kinds of sense gratificatory activities that endanger their life, that may put them in a horrible condition for the rest of their life, but yet they don't want to take good advice and they don't want to seek real happiness. They rather continue suffering in ignorance. This is, in other words, they're careless and unintelligent. So, how can you help such people? Well, they're basically on the level of an animal. What does an animal do? Eat, sleep, mate, and defend. What does a devotee do? He engages in devotional service. Does he also eat, sleep, mate, and defend? Yes, but he only does that according to the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, he's controlled, or he's regulated. And the others who are foolish and unintelligent, they're unregulated. They wake up late, they might not bathe every day, they eat all kinds of horrible things, and they listen to nonsense music or singing. They engage in frivolous activities, but basically they're unregulated, whereas devotees are regulated. And the devotee is careful to follow the regulative principles of devotional service, which is the life of a devotee, and it gives the strength to the devotee to remain steady in their dedication to the Lord. So, all this is explained also in the Bhagavad Gita, which is the quintessential truth of Krishna consciousness, especially when we get to verses 7 to 14. Let me just make sure about that. 7 to 17, yeah. Okay, so we were discussing some of these verses previously, about 3 days ago, but I said that I would continue discussing it, so I will today. So it says, Yoga yukta visuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya sarvabhutatma bhutatma kurvan api na libhyate. So this is a very nice verse, 5th chapter, 7th verse. And it says, one who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Well, this is an explanation of how one can be karma-free. There are 3 types of karma: karma, vikarma, and akarma. So this is a description of akarma. Akarmic activity, or activity without any karmic reaction that binds one to the cycle of birth and death, is devotional service that's performed under the guidance of bona fide spiritual masters. So, such a person who's always engaged in devotional service is considered pure. Why? Well, mam chaiva vibhacharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in devotional service and does not fall down under any circumstance transcends the influence of the modes of material nature and attains the position of Brahman. Brahman means one is Krishna conscious. He understands Brahmajyoti, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, or Krishna. So, because such a person can control the mind and the senses, which are the working, which are the knowledge-acquiring senses and the working senses and the mind, therefore, he is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. So, this is a person who's considered on the path of liberation, or Krishna consciousness. So this endearment to everyone, and the fact that people are very appreciative of such a person, leads to certain, again, qualities or attitudes. So, first of all, the devotee with such emotions sees everyone's connection to Krishna. That's important. He doesn't see anyone separate from Krishna or anything separate from Krishna. So that's extremely important, and it's explained in the first mantra of Ishopanishad. Ishavaisham idam sarvam chatkinja jagatyam jagat tena taktena bunjitaha magritaha kasyasidhanam. So Krishna says, everything material and spiritual is controlled by him. And he is the owner and proprietor. So everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So this is the first, let's say, attitude or quality of a devotee. He recognizes that everything belongs to Krishna. Then, if everything belongs to Krishna, real knowledge is how to use everything in Krishna's service properly for the pleasure of the Lord, because it all belongs to him. Therefore, if that's a fact, then there's no question of attachment or detachment. Those are both material things or attitudes. How can you be attached to something that belongs to someone else? And how can you be detached from something that doesn't belong to you? So, therefore, a devotee is neither attached nor detached, but he's dedicated. He dedicates everything to Krishna. So, we see that these dualities of attachment and detachment, of possession and non-possession, of happiness and distress, love and hate, these are all artificial feelings or attitudes that we have based on ignorance. But the fact is, Ishavaisham idam sarvam. Everything, animate or inanimate, spiritual or material, is owned and controlled by the Lord. So that's the first attitude and basic attitude or conviction that the devotee has. And he cannot see anything separate from Krishna. That's spiritual vision, when you see everything related to Krishna. And material vision is you don't see anything related to Krishna. You think Krishna, well, if he exists, he's up there somewhere else, and this world is different, and he doesn't have anything to do with this world. So that's not a fact. Krishna is present everywhere in the spiritual world, and he's present everywhere in the material world. And no one else has that quality or that power. Then the devotee, by engaging in devotional service, is like watering the root of a tree. If you water the root of the tree, the whole tree is watered. And if you serve Krishna, then you're serving all humanity. But if you serve humanity, it's not sure that you're serving Krishna. So, Madhava Seva is Manava Seva, but Manava Seva is not Madhava Seva. So we have nowadays so-called great Vaishnava pundits, and their motto is Manava Seva is Madhava Seva. But that's what Gandhi's motto was also, and that's what any materialist motto is, that, oh, serving humanity is serving God. It's not a fact. It's not a fact. Look what happened to Gandhi. He made a complete mess. And anybody who has that philosophy will make a mess. So, the devotee is always working in Krishna consciousness as a servant. And he's not attached to his body. So therefore, he understands his body also, mind, the gross body, the subtle body, and his soul. They all belong to Krishna. Everything, animate and inanimate, is owned and controlled by the Lord. So therefore, he should only use these things in the service of the Lord. So in that way, he works in Krishna consciousness, and because he sees Krishna in the heart of every living entity, he's a servant to all persons in the world. He doesn't say, well, I only serve my kind of people, but I don't serve the other kind of people. No. He serves all people because he sees the same Supreme Personality of God in the heart of everyone. So that makes him dear to everyone. And because of that, people are satisfied with his work and his attitudes, and therefore his mind is not disturbed. People's mind becomes disturbed when they know that there's other people that are not pleased with them, and that don't think that they're doing anything right. So it's disturbing to the mind when you feel as if you have people that don't appreciate what you're doing. Well, honest people, if you're an honest devotee and humble, honest people will appreciate it. There's always envious people that may not appreciate it, but the devotee always depends on Krishna, is not disturbed by attitudes of people who have lesser, let's say, conviction about the existence of God as the supersoul in the heart of everyone. So, if the mind is fixed on Krishna, then one cannot be deviated from Krishna consciousness. So these are all points in this purport, and you can see how very compacted with realization this purport is. Actually, there's 9 major points here. That is, the devotee cannot think of any living being separate from Krishna, just like the leaves and branches and twigs and root and everything are all connected in a tree. He doesn't see anyone disconnected from Krishna, even the demons. And he understands that if he serves Krishna, then he'll be serving everyone, including the demigods. So he doesn't have to engage in demigod worship either. He gives respect to the demigods, but he doesn't have to give special worship. That's the meaning of Govardhan Puja. In that pastime of the Lord, he made it very clear that it's unnecessary to serve the devas, because they'll be perfectly satisfied if you serve Krishna properly and with devotion. Because they also are devotees of the Lord. So if you please the Lord, or if they please the Lord, you have the same goal. It's only when you're not working to please the Lord that you're at loggerheads with the devas. But if you're serving Krishna, then they're very happy. That's the purpose of life. And then also, because one is servant of all people, one is humble and meek. Therefore, in general, honest people like such a devotee. And therefore, the mind of the devotee is satisfied and peaceful and controlled. And if the mind is controlled, well, then you can fix it always, the mind, on Krishna, and no chance being deviated from Krishna. And then, if the mind is controlled, then the senses will be controlled. So the senses are not used for deviating from Krishna. And that means, and Prabhupada says here, there's no chance that he will engage his senses in matters other than the service of the Lord. He does not like to hear anything except topics relating to Krishna. He does not like to eat anything which is not offered to Krishna. And he does not wish to go anywhere if Krishna is not involved. Therefore, his senses are controlled. A man of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. One may ask, why then was Arjuna offensive in battle? Well, Prabhupada says he was only superficially offensive. Anyway, this purport is very important for understanding the way the devotee sees the world, the way the devotee conceives of his position in this world. And it's summarized by mantra 1 of Ishopanishad, Ishavaisham idam sarvam. He sees everything as belonging to the Lord. So that is called the fundamental conception of property. Society, there are different types of societies in the world based on their perception of what is property. So capitalist society says that the individual is the proprietor. Socialist society says the state is the proprietor. Communist society says the people themselves as a whole are the proprietor. And a dictatorship says the dictator and his military industrial friends are the proprietors. And in a monarchy, it's the king and his feudal lords that are proprietors. And in anarchy, nobody is the proprietor. So each one of those is an organization of society based on the principle of proprietorship. And they're all wrong. Therefore, anyone living in any of those models of society will not attain real happiness or peace or liberation from the cycle of birth and death. But Krishna consciousness society, we all are convinced that Krishna is the proprietor of everything, material and spiritual. Therefore, you can attain peace when you have thoughts of this is mine, and you have desires to increase this is mine, or what's called aham mameti, I, me, and mine syndrome, then you have anxiety. And this is explained in the next couple of verses, where it says, number 8 and 9, a person in divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that he actually does nothing at all. Now, most people say, what? That doesn't make sense. This sounds like nonsense. What do you mean? You mean to say I don't do nothing? That's not a fact. I'm doing so many things. But actually, he's identifying with the false ego. The false ego is, I am this body. And the body is being forced to do everything by the laws of material nature. But his soul does not have to eat, does not have to reproduce, does not have to defend itself, does not get sick, is not subject to old age, disease, and death. And therefore, all these things that someone is doing, you got to buy some insurance, you need a house, you need a washing machine, you need this, you need that, you need a job. All those things are artificial. The soul doesn't have to eat, doesn't have to sleep, doesn't have to mate, doesn't have to defend. It's imperishable, it's eternal. That's why it says that while doing all these things, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, actually, the living entity does nothing of these things. These are all being forced by the modes of material nature, because the body is functioning as a product of material nature, and the laws of material nature are controlling the body and the mind and the senses. because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he is aloof from them. He meaning the soul. Now this is almost impossible for people to understand, but it's actually the truth. And Prabhupada says, a person in Krishna consciousness is pure in his existence and consequently has nothing to do with any work which depends upon 5 immediate and remote causes. That is, the doer, meaning the living entity, the work, meaning the senses for acquiring knowledge and the senses for work, and the mind, and then the situation, meaning the body, which is the kshetra, the field of activity, and the endeavor. Well, there's so many different endeavors: going to school, going to work, going to the play baseball, whatever. And then ultimately, it's Krishna himself, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is, or as here it says, fortune. So that would mean that based on your previous life and activities and desires, you get a particular type of body, and that body is given to you by material nature, and then you're forced to act according to your previous karma and the body that you have. So that's called fortune, or it's divine. It's referring to Krishna as Paramatma, who knows everything we've done previously, and who gives you a body that's suitable for your unfulfilled desires and the previous karma, and so forth. So then, although he appears to be acting with his body and senses, he is always conscious of his actual position. Well, this is the devotee, not the normal person. The normal person is not at all conscious of his actual position. So in material consciousness, the senses are engaged in sense gratification, but in Krishna consciousness, the senses are engaged in the satisfaction of Krishna's senses. Therefore, the Krishna conscious person is always free, even though he appears to be engaged in affairs of the senses. Activities such as seeing and hearing are actions of the senses meant for receiving knowledge, whereas moving, speaking, evacuating, etc., are actions of the senses meant for work. A Krishna conscious person is never affected by the actions of the senses. He cannot perform any act except in the service of the Lord, because he knows that he is the eternal servitor of the Lord. In other words, the Lord owns this body, the Lord owns this intelligence, the Lord owns all the faculties that one has. Therefore, they should only be used in the service of the Lord. So now the next verse, we sort of stopped last time. We didn't get to this 10th verse, which is very important. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Okay, so this is a description of Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada says, the material world is a sum total manifestation of the 3 modes of material nature, technically called the pradhana. Okay, so there's the pradhana and there's the mahatattva. So is there a difference between the two? Yes, one is subtle and goes from very, very subtle to less subtle, but it's always subtle. And the other is mahatattva, which is gross, which is the sum total of all the material elements. And the pradhana is the 3 modes of material nature which control the material elements. So the Vedic hymns, Sarvam hi etad Brahma, the Mandukya Upanishad, Tasmat etad Brahma nama rupam anam chajayate, the Mundaka Upanishad, and Bhagavad Gita, Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma, indicate that everything in the material world is a manifestation of Brahman. And although the effects are differently manifested, they are non-different from the cause. In other words, all these 3 say that everything is coming ultimately from Krishna, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source for Paramatma, and the source for the Brahma Jyoti, and the source for material nature, and the source for all the jivas. That means that he is the cause and the effect, both. And that everything is coming from him. So everything is, in one sense, non-different than him. But yet, he remains aloof. Maya dakshena prakriti suyate satcharacharam hetunane nakunte jagat viparivartate. So that verse, 9th chapter, 4th verse, explains, as well as some other verses also, achintya beda abeda tattva. And that verse is very important for understanding the position of Krishna. He's different than us. Why? Because he is one and different than us. We have some energy. He is the possessor of all energies. We have individuality. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. No one is equal to him or greater than him. Therefore, he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we are his eternal servants. So, this, by me in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. So that means that he is simultaneously one and different from everyone. And that is also said in this Mandukya Upanishad, the Mundaka Upanishad, and Bhagavad Gita. So, the material world is a manifestation of Brahman, and although the effects are differently manifested, they are non-different from the cause. In the Isha Upanishad, it is said that everything is related to the Supreme Brahman. Okay, Ishavaishamidam Sarvan, we already went over that. Or Krishna, and thus everything belongs to him only. One who knows perfectly well that everything belongs to Krishna, and that he is the proprietor of everything, and that therefore everything is engaged in the service of the Lord, naturally has nothing to do with the results of his activities, whether virtuous or sinful. Even one's material body being a gift of the Lord for carrying out a particular type of action can be engaged in Krishna consciousness. It is then beyond contamination by sinful reactions, exactly as the lotus leaf, though remaining in the water, is not wet. The Lord also says in the Gita, Mai sarvani karmani sannyasya, resign all works unto me, Krishna. The conclusion is that a person without Krishna consciousness acts according to the concept of the material body and senses, but a person in Krishna consciousness acts according to the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and should therefore be engaged in the service of Krishna. That's called real knowledge. So we can see this is not being taught hardly anywhere. And even some Vaishnavas who read the Shastras, but maybe they're not teaching it properly. Because if they say, well, you have to be born a Brahmin in order to be taught all these Vedic mantras and how to chant them correctly. Well, then they're not teaching it properly, the Shastric principles. And they don't understand. They still have a material, bodily conception of life. And because of that, their activities are failing. If we come up with a wrong conclusion, then it'll lead to failure. And if we follow the right conclusion, there'll be success. It might not be right away, but in the long term, there will be success because we're following the right conclusion. So, therefore, the conclusion is that a person without Krishna consciousness acts according to the concept of the material body and senses. But a person in Krishna consciousness acts according to the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and should therefore be engaged in the service of Krishna. Well, I'm sure Prabhupada had that vision. That's why we're here today. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. People would have told us, oh, well, you don't deserve to learn Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam because you were not born in a Brahmana family. You can come to the temple, but we're not going to teach you much. So, does that make sense? The Christians saying, everyone welcome. The Muslims say, everybody welcome. We see you all equally. We're all brothers, and sisters, right? And these other people, these clowns, are saying, well, we're not all equal, though. So you see that why Hinduism is failing, because of this nonsense attitude. In that sense, the Muslims and the Christians are a little bit more advanced than the Hindus. The next verse says, Kayana manasa buddhya kevalar indriyar api. So this verse says, the yogi is abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, Pranayar artair diya vacha. You should serve Krishna with your life, which includes your body and senses, artai with your wealth, and diya your intelligence, and vacha your words. And this verse says, abandoning attachment, act with body, mind, intelligence, and even with the senses, only for the purpose of purification. So this is that we didn't discuss, but today we're discussing it, and I'll end in a few minutes. That is that when one acts in Krishna consciousness for the satisfaction of the senses of Krishna, any action, whether the body, mind, intelligence, or even the senses, is purified of material contamination. There are no material reactions resulting from the activities of a Krishna conscious person. Therefore, purified activities, which are generally called sadachar, can be easily performed by acting in Krishna consciousness. Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.187 describes this as follows. Iha yasya harir dasya kamana manasajira akilasvapi vastasu jivan mukta sauchyate. A person acting in Krishna consciousness, or in other words, in the service of Krishna with his body, mind, intelligence, and words, is a liberated person even within the material world, although he may be engaged in many so-called material activities. So you can be liberated now, even in this body, even in the material world, even with the three modes of material nature and time and adhyatma, digbodhika, didaivika sufferings, and with so many demons. Yes, you can be a liberated person today in this world, thanks to the Vaishnava Acharyas, especially Srila Prabhupada, and of course Krishna himself, who's explaining this 5,000 years ago to Arjuna. Therefore, all the knowledge is in this one book, right? And it's a rather short book, 700 verses. And if you just study this one book, you have all knowledge, right? So, such a person who is using, pranaya, artaya, diya, vacha, or everything in the service of the Lord, has no false ego, because he's not attached to the body. He doesn't believe that he is this material body or that he possesses the body. So he doesn't say, I'm an American, or I'm a Telangana, or I'm a Andhra, or I'm a this, or I'm a that. He says, I am the eternal servant of Krishna. That's who I am. So he's not attached to the body, he's attached to the soul and its relationship to Krishna. Therefore, he doesn't have a false ego. And he himself belongs to Krishna, and the body too belongs to Krishna. When he applies everything produced to the body, mind, intelligence, words, life, wealth, etc., whatever he may have within his possession, to Krishna's service, he is at once dovetailed with Krishna. He is one with Krishna and is devoid of the false ego that leads one to believe that he is the body, etc. This is the perfect stage of Krishna consciousness. Haribol. So, There's a really important verse. I'll stop there. There's a few more verses. We'll cover that tomorrow. This is an explanation of what is Krishna consciousness, A to Z, in just a few verses by Srila Prabhupada. Are there any questions?
Those verses, they're all from one, sorry, Maharaj.
Yeah.
They're all in which chapter?
Fifth chapter.
Fifth chapter, right.
Yeah.
They're from which verse, from which to?
From verse 10 or 9 or 8, 1 second. No,
10 to?
7
7
to 17.
Oh.
Amazing.
Yeah, everything is there.
Any-
But, so my question is that, it's good to hear this, it makes a lot of sense, but the problem is to really apply it, to live it, to realize it.
You're living it by being in this temple, right? You're living it. I'm living it. Anybody in the temple is living it, whether they realize it or not.
So that's the point. I mean, I had to be constantly situated on that platform, that, you don't have, no longer all this material inebrities, like even subtle thinking, this body belong to this community, this and that. That's the it takes long, it might take a long time, right?
I agree with you, yeah.
It's not.
We have to hear it over and over again. Just like you're asking me, which chapter is that?
Right, exactly.
Fifth chapter. How many times have you read the fifth chapter?
Exactly.
So that's why there's many levels of realization. It's all there, but it might not be there, right? Because there are many levels of realization that we gradually access through regulated hearing and chanting and just following the process. That it just shows you why this book, written 5,000 years ago, is still being read today. It's just as valid today as it was 5,000 years ago, and it'll be just as valid 5,000 years from now, or 5 million years from now. This is the absolute truth. It's nothing relative in this book. It's all absolute truth. Where else? What other book can give you concentrated absolute truth? No other book. No other book. It's just Bhagavad Gita. That's why Gita Jayanti is coming up. We should make a big effort to promote Bhagavad Gita. We should do it every day. But we have to be convinced ourselves. Oh, wait a minute. This has all the truth that one could ever aspire for. In this short book. It's actually a short book. That's not like Srimad Bhagvatam or Mahabharata. It's a very short book, but it has all this knowledge in it. It's up to us to assimilate it and be able to explain it to others.
And this statement Prabhupada made here makes an purport. Those who are not devotees of the Lord are callous and unintelligent.
Calloused, yes.
Yeah, callous, yeah. Unintelligent, unless one is thoroughly intelligent. It cannot be devotee of the Lord. So, now we can discuss about intelligence, well, they call me, they're highly qualified, they're very intelligent, they occupy, high posts.
No. Intelligence means you can differentiate between the jiva and paramatma. That's a definition. That's one definition of intelligence, one part of the definition of intelligence. Spiritual intelligence, not mundane intelligence. But mundane intelligence, they have some different meanings for it, but in spiritual circles, the definition is very specific. Jnana means you can differentiate between the jiva and paramatma. Let me show you where that is.
I had several times, and Prabhupada explained about this, intelligence, to understand your ultimate welfare the ultimate good, actually. That's the meaning of intelligence.
Yeah. See, if you look at 15:19, Bhagavad Gita 15:19, in the purport, Prabhupada says, one should submissively hear from Bhagavad Gita that these living entities are always subordinate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who is able to understand this, according to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, knows the purpose of the Vedas. No one else knows the purpose of the Vedas.
Understand? So it means that to understand the ultimate, like this verse, it said, Nate vidu swata.
Gatim hi Vishnu.
Yeah. You're right.
Yes.
Yeah? Is that?
Yes.
Often that verse quotes Nate vidu, because they don't understand the ultimate good that lies in Vishnu.
Right. Or, as it says in the Rig Veda, Om Tat Vishnu Paramam Padam Sadapasyanti Surayo. That the ultimate goal of life is surrender at the lotus feet of Krishna. But yeah, there are many verses that say this throughout the Vedas. But the idea is that we are all subordinate to Krishna. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So intelligence is defined as being able to differentiate between the jiva and paramatma. Let me see where the exact statement is. But that's what jnana means. Okay. Jiva. Sorry, one second. Okay, so it's defined 209. Seven, okay. 209. The knowledge, so Srimad Bhagavatam 2.9.31. Jnanam paramam guyam me yad vijnana samanvitam. The knowledge of the self and the Supreme Self is very confidential and mysterious. But such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if explained with their various aspects by the Lord Himself. Bhagavad Gita gives us that general and specific knowledge of the self, meaning the individual self. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. So that's the whole point, that this is the specific knowledge. Jnana refers to the specific knowledge of the spirit soul's constitutional position and his relationship to the Supreme Soul. There it is, right there. Right? That's what jnana means. Now, vijnana means that you've understood. Jnana means you're introduced to it and you're trying to understand it. But vijnana means when you're actually engaged in devotional service, then you've understood it. Jnana is theoretical understanding. Like Mayavadis, they also have jnana. But they don't have vijnana unless they're actually engaged in devotional service. So this is also explained, it's third chapter, 41st verse in the purport. But then it's also explained in 75. it says, therefore, jnana, or knowledge that one is not this material body, but spirit soul, is not sufficient for liberation. One has to act in the status of spirit soul, otherwise there is no escape from material bondage. Action in Krishna consciousness is not, however, action on the fruitive platform. Activities performed in full knowledge strengthen one's advancement in real knowledge. Without Krishna consciousness, mere renunciation of fruitive activities does not actually purify the heart of a conditioned soul. As long as the heart is not purified, one has to work on the fruitive platform. But action in Krishna consciousness automatically helps one escape the result of fruitive action so that one need not descend to the material platform. So I don't know whether, in other words, he's saying that jnana is knowledge that one is not this material body, but spirit soul. And then next after that is there's a difference between spirit soul and Paramatma, or Krishna, Supreme Soul. And then next after that is you engage in the service of the Lord. So the Mayavadis are on the level of jnana. They understand I'm not this body. They understand that I am Brahman. But they don't understand bhakti.
Is that the understanding of theoretical? Yeah.
It's theoretical knowledge, yes. Jnana is theoretical knowledge. Vijnana is realized knowledge. And then lastly, 641, let's see what that says. Lastly, 641. It says that perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the super soul is known in terms of Vedic literature as jnana. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both the soul and the super soul as yet distinct is knowledge. As one yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activity and the knower of activity is not in perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer of nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. Okay, so that, again, it's saying basically the same thing. You have to know the difference between the individual soul and Paramatma, but that includes knowing the position of the material nature.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another stage beyond that. That is when you actually not only understand it, but you realize it by engagement in devotional service. Then you've really understood.
It's interesting here. I mean, this I'm talking from this purport today. So purpose says, unless one is thoroughly intelligent,
yes,
it cannot be devoted to the Lord.
Yeah, so you don't just stop with theoretical knowledge. You
Exactly.
have to go to practical application of it. That's really intelligent.
Actually, there's a bhajan which is quite popular saying that Jai Jana Bhaje Krishna Se Borush Chatur.
Okay. Bhaje Krishna means you worship
Jai
Krishna.
Jana, Jai Jana Bhaje Krishna Se Borush Chatur.
When
So
this living entity worships Krishna.
those who engage in devotional service, they're highly intelligent.
Yes.
Boro means,
Haribol. Okay, thank you very much. Well, glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah, this word intelligent can be very tricky.